What's going on, guys? It's Seamoose here, and today I have a patch notes discussion video. So obviously the new patch just came out, and because unfortunately he wasn't able to join me yesterday on the Free Agent Invitational, I decided I would invite Psychowaffle out to join me on this little vid.
Hello.
So for those of you who don't know, Psychowaffle is the captain and the support player for Team Method GG, the organization I worked with. So let's take a look, go right into the patch notes. So the first big change is the competitive play Season 2 changes. They made a lot of changes. I actually made a video about it earlier on, but the biggest change for me is probably the 1 through 5,000 scale rating as opposed to 1 to 100, which is what they did before. And there's also some tier progression as well. You have Bronze through Grandmaster as opposed to just being rated a rank 40 player or a rank 60 player.
Yep, I agree. I think it's much better than what it was before, and definitely helps. Hopefully, it helps spread out the bell curve better than what it was before, with almost everyone getting stuck in the middle, and having very few people actually scattered elsewhere. So
yeah, that's one of the issues I think too with the normalized system of 1 to 100. It's going to be very hard to actually get people to be evenly distributed, because you're, of course, going to have a bell curve, like you said. The average player will be sitting around 50, whereas I think it was a player at rank 60 was like top 6th percentile, which is not indicative of, I guess, what it represents. A few other changes are sudden death is going away. That's a really welcome change. I think myself, Psycho, and most pros would agree that sudden death is hopefully something that can be avoided entirely, as stopwatch is generally considered the competitive format. And with Time Bank, that addition, I was curious as to what your thoughts were, Psychowaffle, on what you think about Time Bank on payload maps and how that's being handled.
I still would prefer stopwatch, but I think Time Bank is a step in the right direction, or maybe it is the right direction by itself. I don't know. I would have to play with it more, find out what it's actually going to do for the game. I do think it could create some more intense moments with how the overtime is going to work in payload pushes and second rounds. So looking forward to it personally.
Yeah, well, we'll have to see. Obviously, there's a lot of things that I'm sure that the Blizzard devs are considering. And I agree with you that Time Bank is probably a step in the right direction. It doesn't make things as clear-cut as, for example, Stopwatch would be, but it's still great that if you have a really good time, you're then rewarded, obviously, with having a lot in your Time Bank. So we discussed a couple of the competitive play changes. There's going to be a lot more, and I would absolutely, recommend that you guys take a look at these patch notes yourself. But there's a lot of changes to rating decay. You can't decay at a certain rank, so for most average to low ranks, you're not really going to be able to decay out of them, and then you'll stay at that rating. And there's also a restriction on what kind of player within what range of skill, which you can attest to that a little bit more, Psychowaffle. You played a lot more Season 1 rank than I did. In groups, there were, to my understanding, a lot of differences where there was almost situations of like boosting people and playing with lower ranked people intentionally to get that underdog.
Yeah, that was actually a pretty big problem because of the fact of how it would affect not only their rating getting excessively increased for no reason, and you getting less and less points, even no matter what the skill level of that player was, just due to their rating being low, and closing the gap up should hopefully, one, eliminate that and make for better games in ranked instead of the one-sided games that happen a lot in the old system. So, yeah.
Some other changes we saw are some small changes to maps. Obviously, Eichenwald was released, and that is a very, very large map. I'm curious to see where that stands in competitive play, and a few different distribution methods, I guess, of competitive points. You get a lot more. You obviously have to spend a lot more points to actually get the golden weapon and stuff. And just some tweaks, I think, that Blizzard wanted to do to the system that Jeff Kaplan actually announced a few weeks ago in a developer video, and I'm sure that they're just going to keep iterating on season-by-season basis some of these fine-tuning and adjustments for ranked mode. Anyway, the hero balance updates, so the meat of the patch notes, I would say, as far as what changes to the metagame and stuff. Probably a big change is the projectile change. So projectile heroes are a lot stronger now.
Yeah. It's kind of insane, actually, with some of them. But, yeah. I do kind of like it because I wasn't really a fan of the old meta, and I would like to see where it goes with those type of changes as well. So, let's see what happens.
Yep. I think a lot of players, too, there was a lot of hitscan DPS players, and while certainly that's part of Overwatch, it's like a true FPS in some respects with hitscan DPS. I think also part of the beauty of it is that it's like an arena FPS. So there's projectile heroes, there's all different kinds of heroes, and buffing them a little bit, changing them a little bit, so they have an easier time landing those projectiles. I think is a fine change so long as it's monitored, and that's something that Blizzard is saying too in this patch. They're watching this and they'll make additional changes if necessary. So hopefully that goes perfectly well. Another interesting change that the ultimates, their charge is consumed faster by every quarter of a second as opposed to just 1 second, which I don't know if you can talk to me about how much of an effect that might have on the competitive scene. I think that's a pretty good change as well.
So before, you could actually sometimes get away with using just a piece of your ultimate charge to kill somebody and then dying, and it was actually an advantage for you because you get it back up instantly for the cost of that. And that's a new change. You can no longer do that. Not only that, it also can really hurt people who are just ulting in a panic and forces you to use ults more intelligently than before. So really anything like that I think is good for the game.
Yep, so that's going to make it a little bit more punishing if you use that ability incorrectly, I guess. Which I agree with you. I think it's pretty good for the game. So take a look at some of the actual hero changes. Defense Matrix to Diva changed to a 1 second delay as opposed to 0.5 seconds. Honestly, I played with that a little bit. It's a little bit annoying, but I don't actually think that's going to be a big change. I don't know if you disagree here, but I don't think it's going to make Diva unplayable or change her viability at all. I think she'll still be a occasionally played niche pick as far as tanks are concerned.
Yeah, I think that she's still going to be picked when you don't pick her before, but it's just that now it'll be harder for her to sometimes like completely shut down your Mercury or something just by sitting in front of him, just due to the nature of removing the charge rate or making it so she can't just flick it on and off whenever she wants between shots.
Right.
So hopefully that gets rid of that because it was very frustrating to actually play against.
So with the projectile reversion, the meme back in the day was that Hanzo's arrows are tree trunks. And so there are 3 changes here. The first one is that his arrow size has been reduced a little bit by a third, even though the projectiles were made larger anyway. His maximum projectile speed has been increased by 30%, and he also moves faster while he's knocking his arrow on the bow. So he is... those are a lot of changes, aren't they?
Yeah, he is an interesting spot now.
Yeah.
Where before it was really random on whether or not he would kill your whole team, and now at least at mid-range. Yeah, mid-range, really, really good Hanzo play is extremely scary. Not only that, I really, or at least originally I thought they were only going to go with like a movement speed decrease change for his draw speed or whatever, so that he could be a little more mobile because it was very restricted before. But he's pretty crazy right now, I think.
Yeah, so we'd probably expect him on a lot of different maps than right, whereas before he was much more niche.
Yeah, you're going to be seen more than First Point Kings Row.
Yeah, that's where we played him. So take a look at the next hero who got a pretty good buff. Blizzard got 2 buffs, 2 seemingly slight on paper, but pretty strong buffs when you consider how good May's kit was originally. Her Blizzard projectile, the ultimate, now pierces barriers, and the radius was also increased from 8 meters to 10 meters, which is 25% increase. So I've seen a little bit of May before, and now with the patch, we've even encountered it in scrims occasionally. I think it'll probably be pretty commonly used.
Yeah. They seem like very, very small buffs on paper, but when you factor in the radius increase, especially with the not only nerf speed boost, but the less amounts of Lucius you're going to see, the radius increase actually makes it almost impossible for a lot of characters to escape her ultimate, unless they're on the outer edges, where before you could usually just walk right out of it. as well as the piercing barriers, which isn't really huge. It still doesn't let you use like certain positional advantage with it anymore, as it can go wherever she wants it to go.
Yeah, the also you have to consider that the fact that it's a linear increase from the radius means that the area is pretty significantly buffed too. Like it's going to be covering a lot more area. For those of you who remember geometry, like circumference 2 pi r and pi r squared for area. But anyway, so we're probably going to expect to see a lot more Mei. I don't know if we'll see her honestly as commonly as Hanzo, and I don't think she'll be a one size sort of fits all glove pseudo DPS hero, but probably on a handful of maps I think a lot of teams will consider her.
Yeah.
So the next hero to look at is McCree, and this is not a big change, but I think one that was probably well deserved. His Deadeye now drains over a quarter of a second period, and it can go to 0 completely when it's confirmed. So I mean, you can talk to me about what you think about this ult charge or ult decreasing charge effect, and whether or not like it's gonna make McCree any less viable or not.
It hurts. I don't think it makes him any less viable, but it hurts some of the power he had, because essentially McCree could put you in situations where he could zone you for 6 seconds with ultimate if he had a very good positioning on you, and once you try to re-engage a fight, once the ultimate is done zoning you, simply like 2 or 3 headshots could a lot of times give him his ult right back, and you no longer have to worry about the situations ever. And I think it's a good change, because I think those situations are a little bit silly. So
yeah, I've had this theory about McCree that probably a lot of the developers, when they made McCree and gave him all the aspects of his kit, they didn't expect him to be as strong, and they probably didn't have that many proficient players that just showed us the strength of McCree, especially on beta and release. This McCree has always been very strong. And that's why they gave him the Deadeye too. It's also like it's one of the most unique offense hero abilities, and I think I recognize from a design perspective why they gave him that 50% refund, but in terms of his power, it kind of had to go.
yeah, I agree with that.
So the next hero to look at is Mercy, so definitely in your repertoire, as you have always been a Mercy main from the get-go. Her healing per second has been increased by 20%, and the resurrected allies can move a little bit sooner.
So, like, as a Mercy player, you know, any buff is nice, but I don't really think these are necessary, especially with the nerfs to, like, Lucio, or, you know, the nerfs that were supposed to happen to Zen. I don't think they were like necessary, but at the same time, I mean, they do help her out a lot, and you will see a lot more play due to it. So, I don't know.
Yeah, I think Mercy probably is going to see play, or at least consideration from teams on a lot of maps too now. Before, I don't think she was necessarily bad. It's just that the other supports were stronger than her, or were more usable. But now that we have nerfs to changes to Zenyatta and a couple of nerfs to Lucio, like, she can contest those much better.
Yeah.
So the next change, and again a little bit of context, both Psycho and I play for Method, who has a very, very talented young Genji player, and he is not happy with these changes, Psychowaffle. All the changes to Genji, so he doesn't get the double jump reset when he wall climbs, so no more triple jump. His Swift Strike is easier to stop, I guess, easier to staunch because of traps, and the Junkrat trap can catch it. The Widowmaker Venom Mine and Junkrat Steel Trap don't take damage from Swift Strike, and Swift Strike also can be cancelled, so the famous animation cancel combo from Genji. And then another change to Genji was that his ultimate was changed from 8 seconds to 6 seconds, so a lot of changes, and not in a positive direction for Genji.
No, I don't actually like these changes. I think they were in the wrong direction. I feel that what they should do with Genji is more or less shift his power from Swift Strike somewhere else. And I feel like a lot of what these changes do is just really hurt the skill cap of the character. Kind of on the lines of the Widow scope changes, where they just nerf the animation of canceling abilities of him. Same time, I do think nerfing Genji or doing something with him was justified due to the nature of Zenyatta effectively lowering his time to kill to be insane, as well as Harmony Orb being on him. He was just too powerful
Mm-hmm.
last patch. A lot of it did have to do with the duration of his Dragon Blade, which was cut down. But at the same time, you're still getting almost the same value. It's just that when you trade ultimates like Zenyatta's ultimates for a Genji sword now, it effectively actually cancels the entirety of it out, whereas before Genji still had 2 seconds where he could easily kill 1 or 2 people after this all was over.
Right. I think Genji's a unique hero in that he has so much outplay potential and he has a mechanically very high skill cap. And especially with the animation combo and the double jumping and stuff, it was kind of cool to see people do those feats of agility, but I can understand how they're frustrating to play against. And I think that, as much as I love the animation combo, and I hope that quick animation cancels are maintained for the most part, I think that the burst damage Genji's in particular had to go. But I don't know if you could think of maybe there was an alternative they could have done in that regard. I don't think Genji changes necessarily weren't warranted, but considering Zenyatta was strong like you said and stuff, I feel like these are quite a bit, and we probably won't see him nearly as much as we did before.
Definitely will not see him as much as before. I do believe he's still strong in a lot of scenarios, but
okay,
it's whether or not he is stronger than other picks in those same scenarios, and I think a lot of times that will not be the case anymore.
Mm-hmm. All right, so that's Genji, probably one of the more high-profile changes as far as buffs and nerfs are concerned. And the next hero to look at, this is actually a pretty significant change too, as Lucio's Amp It Up was decreased by 30% on the speed. So you can definitely test more to what your thoughts are on this, and maybe talk a little bit about testing around in scrims and just on the PTR and play yourself. But I think this is a big change, but I don't know if it's actually so bad that Lucio isn't viable anymore.
So I definitely don't think that they make Lucio unviable or anything like that. And I do think that speed boost either needed to be reworked some fashion or it needed to be nerfed as it was now.
Mm-hmm.
Because before, essentially, speed boost was too good at exploiting enemy positioning,
Mm-hmm.
or it almost get into a situation where no positioning is good, just due to the nature of how fast it actually is. And now with it being toned down, it allows more room for proper positioning to be able to actually counter Lucio's speed boost. And I'm not entirely sure where he's going to fit in a lot of comps because of Mercy getting buffed and Zenyatta, well, I still think he's very strong.
Mm-hmm.
So it'll be interesting to see how he plays out. I still do think he is necessary in Koth, just due to the speeding out of spawn giving you the positional advantage that you really need.
Okay. So we'll see whether or not he's played in the other maps as well. Roadhog got a change, and this was a tricky change at first. I wasn't sure what it meant, but then we played the PTR a little bit. His hook is essentially more consistent in where it lands and pulls the target before. That's correct? To my understanding, the way this is worded, it basically means you won't see any really, really wonky hooks. I think was it NRG Rise or something recently had this crazy Zenyatta versus Roadhog hook over the last point of Dorado, the wall, and it was just this crazy hook. Those situations won't happen as commonly anymore, but Roadhog's hook is also more consistent and actually putting the target in front of him.
Yeah, before this change, a lot of times, sometimes people would fly behind you, sometimes they would just get stuck on corners,
Mm-hmm.
walls, anything. It was never guaranteed where they were actually going to wind up coming to you or where it was going to be at. With these changes, though, outside of a few scenarios I've noticed, it is much more reliable for Roadhog to kill anybody he hooks, as they should land about directly in front of them where they're supposed to every single
Mm-hmm.
time. I actually am scared about these changes, even if they seem very minuscule,
Mm-hmm.
because I think at any moment Roadhog could really take over the meta again. And I'll just have to see what really happens and pans out with him.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think it's smart to make it so the ability wasn't as buggy as before.
Okay.
So that's definitely good.
I mean, before we get into predicting the rise of Roadhog, I do think Overwatch has a lot of innate counters to Roadhog. Since he is so big, you can kind of build ultimate off him too. But I agree, Hook is one of those abilities that just when you get hit by it, you're just like, oh shit, like this is the end for me. And with a more consistent change to the hook, I wonder if its power right now will be polarizing almost in a way, where it's so strong that you have to use it, like we kind of saw when McCree was initially nerfed and then Roadhog became really common. We'll see. So I'm guessing you would say that we will probably see Roadhog on a good amount of maps, though?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Going to the next hero, this is a hero that my favorite hero in the game, Soldier 76. His heavy pulse rival was... The bullet spread was changed a little bit as opposed to firing 4 bullets and then having a spread with bloom. The spread is now 3 bullets and then it has a bloom, but the recovery time is much faster, and so that's a bit of a reversion to what happened before. And anecdotally, I think a lot of people enjoy playing Soldier now much more, and I think he's more consistent. His DPS is more consistent at mid-range, and I think this could probably be a good change for him that makes him see some play occasionally.
So definitely makes him more consistent at mid-range, especially when swapping targets. I have heard, though I don't know if it's confirmed, that in like a entirely optimal scenario, which is really never going to happen, that even before these changes he could potentially do more damage. But the nature of being able to swap targets and get the reliable first few shots every single time, I feel outweighs that a lot, though.
So perhaps before in 20XX he'd be more optimal, but now he's a little bit more optimal in heavy combat situations for human-controlled players.
Yes.
Okay, there we go. Little 20XX melee reference, or I guess it's a Mega Man reference for those of you who are cool with the esports times. Anyway, another change, and I'm just going to say it's change, not controversial, but it's a pretty big change. It's Orb of Discord nerfed from 50% to 30%, but all of Zenyatta's orbs on the left click or the right click were buffed from 40 damage to 46.
So this is sort of a... it's kind of a power shift. If it does effectively nerf the team effectiveness at killing the orbs that are discorded, while keeping Zenyatta's damage on these targets the exact same. But at the same time, it also makes Zenyatta's damage much higher on targets that aren't discorded to begin with. And really, in certain situations, this is almost seen as a buff for a character that I thought was already insanely strong. And I don't know if it was so justified to give him something in return for nerfing Orb of Discord, but we still really need to see how it does pan out.
Well, his DPS now, even without Discord, is probably going to be quite high. If every shot is doing 46, you have 20 rounds per magazine. I mean, amateur player isn't going to hit a lot of these shots, but pros with the headshots too, this guy can do a serious amount of damage. So we'll have to see, like you said. Like I think it's one of the changes this patch that's probably more questionable, because I think they nerfed something that was a good change because Discord was oppressive, but I wonder whether or not he actually needed the compensation for the bonus damage.
Yeah, because the bonus damage effectively makes it so if they're not discorded, now instead of taking 5 shots to the body to kill, it's 4, and you could potentially do like 2 headshots, 1 body, and also kill before as you couldn't.
So we'll have to see how that plays out. And taking a look at the other miscellaneous changes, Watchpoint Gibraltar, the first checkpoint was removed. I think universally that's been like fine. It just kind of added extra time to the map. Originally it was put in there because people were losing too bad, and then the point got really far back. But since teams are relatively good at staying offensive, I think it's good that it was removed, because it makes the map a little bit faster and also lets the defense actually have a chance in those first points.
Yeah, I feel like it opens up the viability of actually trying to like hold directly off the start of the map as well. Because before, you essentially gained almost nothing from doing it unless you were just going for like an all-in brawl style where you're doing a fight as a risk to get ult advantage over the enemy team, and then you would generally go back to where most people hold, which is like server, tarp, and the like upper catwalk in the back of the initial or the actual like ending point for the first checkpoint. So I do think you'll see a bit more from this change. It does make it, I feel like, actually very hard for attackers, though. So, again, you have to see how that sort of thing pans out in the long run, as I don't have much experience playing with the new watch point yet.
Yeah, so we'll have to see on that front. Another miscellaneous change: you can now have allied health bars as an option if you are a non-support player. It used to be only supports, and then they extended that to Zarya and Soldier, and now they're doing that to all heroes. I think that just offers more clarity as to where your team is, especially if you're in a solo setting. You don't know what your allies are doing. You can see, oh, my Reinhardt has no HP. You know, we should back off or whatever.
Yeah, great change in my opinion.
Other than that, just a few more miscellaneous changes. They fixed a bug that allowed kill participation to go over 100%. I kind of like that bug, but I understand why they got rid of it. And yeah, I would definitely recommend, obviously, to check out these patch notes yourselves. I'll be sure to link them here. But, you know, in summary, Psychowaffle, what are you sort of looking forward to as far as this patch and the changes? Like, what are some really things to look out for, I guess?
I think it's definitely going to mix up compositions on maps a lot, whereas before you could actually almost get away with only running the like Zarya, Winston, Tracer, Genji, Lucio's, and Yada on every single map. You could actually get away with that, except for in King's Row, and even then you could still get away with it if you were good enough at it. Whereas I think you will see a lot more competition on different maps, and I personally am happy because I get to play more than one character. So I think some of the changes in the right direction and some might have been necessary, but again, you have to see how that sort of thing pans out in the long run.
Yeah, I think they addressed a lot of things that were a concern. They might have addressed them a little bit too much in one direction, but I also feel like this is like the first time they're kind of balancing for live and stuff, and like it'll take some time, and I'm excited. I think you are too, just to try different heroes as well and see how that works. So we'll just have to see how the professional meta develops. I think eventually we'll have some stuff that's considered like standard again, but the fact that it's got to be a different variation and hopefully a little bit more frequent and common, since I think it was like 10 heroes or something out of the 22 in the last meta game weren't really used commonly. So they're probably just working towards that, and I think the fact that they addressed a lot of these issues is a pretty good start. Anyway, that's going to wrap it up for this video. Again, for those of you who don't know who I'm talking to, this is Psychowaffle, the captain and support of Method. Is there anything you'd like to say, dude, before we wrap up this vid?
Shoutouts to our sponsors.
Can you name them all?
In one moment.
He's got to pull it up.
Yep.
I'd look to the side, too. It's,
shout out to Twitch, Curse, Jinx, Sennheiser, and Alienware.
So there we go. Is she missing one?
Am I?
I think you are.
Might be.
I think you're missing Duality Media. But yeah, shoutouts to, of course, Method. I also work for them as the coach and analyst. Thank you again, Psychowaffle, for coming to the channel and for the patch video, and yeah, hope to see you around in the future.
Alright, thanks for having me.
Okay guys, that's going to wrap it up. Thank you very much for watching, everyone, and I will see you all tomorrow.